The Ford 1.0 EcoBoost engine. Great when it's running, a headache when it's not. And I've done a few videos on this engine covering many common problems. So I have decided to put a compilation together of all the common problems that go on with this engine so that you can watch them all in one place. I'll show you all the faults and the fixes. Please enjoy the EcoBoost compilation. We will be tackling extreme cases where engine is overheating, right up to a blown head gasket. And we're going to start with a very, very common problem that everyone will experience, the tight header tank cap. I'll show you a little trick that will stop this happening in the future. Just by using some spray grease or any normal grease on the seal, it will make this much easier to open and close. As you can see, it's really easy to do now and will save any further problems with this issue. This is a really common problem and I always recommend doing this on every service. I have had it a few times where the cap has actually broken away from the seal and you will need to replace the complete cap unit. And this is what happens when it breaks. The centre sticks in the reservoir. Just some decent pliers and a bit of patience and it will come out. So the next time you take off your coolant cap, give it a quick grease up and it will save you any further problems. Next up, let's change the alternator belt. If you want to change your alternator belt, serpentine belt or auxiliary belt as it's also known, on your car, then it couldn't be any simpler. In this video, we will be changing the belt on the EcoBoost engine, but this operation is pretty much the same on every vehicle. If it has a guard on it, like this one, then we need to remove that first. There's just 4 bolts on this one to remove it, and then it just lowers down. And you can see all the fastenings that hold this on. Sometimes you may need to remove the wheel arch liner. With this out of the way, we can now see the auxiliary belt. It's worth noting the direction and where the belt actually goes, because sometimes you can have a bit of fun putting them back on. So we're looking at the tensioner here and you can see the hexagon fitting. We can put a ratchet in here on this particular model and then use the ratchet to release the tension on the auxiliary belt. With the tension released, you can put a dowel into the tensioner to hold the tensioner off. Isn't always necessary, but is an option for you. If the tensioner hasn't got a hexagon fitting to tension it, you can pull down on the auxiliary belt like this, and then obviously insert or take out the pin as and when required. No, it is definitely easier with the pin, but depending on your resources, obviously, that's what option you will have. So, as you can see, not too difficult. Obviously, different models vary, and I do have some different videos on different models. I will leave a couple of links for you to see at the end of this video. And in this next video, we will be changing the water pump on the 1.0 EcoBoost engine. And basically, carrying on from the previous video, the water pump is located at the top up here. But this time, you will need to loosen the 3 10mm bolts that secure the pulley prior to removing the auxiliary belt. This will make it much easier once the belt is off for removing the pulley. With that done, get the auxiliary belt out of the way. And then once we start back up the top of the engine bay, I always recommend taking the headlight out on this model. It makes life much easier. There's just 2 Torx 30 bolts and then the headlamp will pop out. Don't forget to unclip the multi-plug. You can still see that there really isn't much to see. So we need to take off the induction pipe across the top, various pipes, a couple of 10mm bolts, and then we can get this out of the way, allowing us much more space. At this stage, we need to empty the coolant. So just remove the coolant cap, and I always recommend just popping off the bottom hose off the radiator and catch the coolant in something suitable. And we can now definitely see the water pump. And all that's left to do is just remove the fastening bolts holding the water pump to the engine, and then the water pump should just pop off of the engine block. Before you fit the new one, just make sure it's correct. Check it against the old one. Give the mating face a really good clean so that it seals correctly. And I'm sure you will agree, with that headlamp removed, you can definitely see a lot more. And now it's time to refit the new water pump. Just fit it in reverse order, make sure that everything is tight. And when you come to fit the pulley, just make sure that you check that the bolts are tight when the belt is back on. And when that's done, refill with fresh coolant and check for leaks. And up next, the thermostat housing on the EcoBoost 1 litre engine. It's located on the cylinder head above the gearbox. It looks a little bit difficult to get to, but it's really not that bad. Start by removing the brake booster hose and then the ducting for the inlet. Remove the wiring harness of the mass sensor and then remove the airbox. This will make the thermostat a lot more visible. To prevent coolant going everywhere when you disconnect the hoses, I would recommend removing the bottom hose and draining the cooling system into a suitable container. Starting at the back, there's two hoses. One is a quick release pipe and one is just a normal spring clip hose. You can see here how the quick release mechanism works. You just squeeze them both together and the pipe will release. So on the front part of the thermostat housing, there is a multi-plug that needs disconnecting and then the main hose. Leave the innermost hose connected until the housing is loose. It will make it much easier to release. To make the bolts a little bit more accessible, remove the purge valve. The inner hose can be seen here. Now, using a quarter drive ratchet and an 8mm socket with an extension, you will be able to loosen the 4 bolts holding the thermostat housing to the engine block. With the housing loose, pull it gently forwards and then you will be able to access the inner pipe and release the clip to release the thermostat housing. Prior to replacement, ensure that all the mating faces are clean and compare the old and new unit to ensure that it is correct. Check that the gasket is fitted correctly and replace in reverse order. Now all that's left to do is double check all your work, make sure everything's tight and refill it with coolant. Now go and give it a good road test and make sure there's no leaks. And that's it. And this time, in this video, we're going to be changing the alternator on the 1 litre EcoBoost fitted to many Fords. It's located at the front here. It does look very difficult to remove, but following these instructions, you will be able to do it fairly easily. Before we start, we need to isolate the power. So remove the positive terminal from the battery and ensure that is permanently isolated. Then, to make things more accessible, we will need to remove the inner wheel arch liner, and you may prefer to remove the wheel also. Pull down firmly on the drive belt at the bottom and then using a suitable pin, locate it in the tensioner like so. Then remove the tensioner. Now the belt can easily be removed. In order to lower the alternator, we need to remove the air conditioning pump. This is easily done. Unclip the wiring harness, there are 2 multi-plugs, and then remove the 3 bolts holding the compressor in position, and then it will just lower down and hang out of the way. You don't need to remove the air conditioning pipes. You can now see how much extra space there is for the alternator. Unclip the wiring harness, then move back round the front side of the engine and remove the 2 retaining bolts holding the alternator in place. You will definitely notice that the alternator is very tight to remove, so using a suitable pry bar, steadily pry the alternator outwards, and once it's lowered you can remove the final wiring main lead on top of the alternator. It will be much easier once the alternator has been lowered. And that's it. Why not let me know how you got on with the job in the comment section below. And in the next video we're going to be tackling the starter motor. The starter motor is located at the very back of the engine bay, right here. But don't let this put you off, because it isn't as difficult as it seems. Looking from underneath, you can just see it above the exhaust near the front subframe. As we are working on the electrical system, like the last video, we need to isolate and disconnect the battery first. And then, underneath, we need to disconnect the power lead and the starter lead. Just a 13 and a 10 millibolt, and then the wiring harness will just lift away. And then after that, all we need to do is remove the lower bolt securing the starter motor. The most difficult part is the top bolt, as this goes in from the opposite side from the gearbox. In this case, we need to remove the battery and the battery carrier, and the airbox needs to come out of the way too. With these out of the way, then we can just get in the back corner, and you will just see in a moment. Then using an extension, you should just be able to get onto the bolt and loosen the bolt, and once this is out, the starter motor should just come out nice and easily from underneath. Just make sure you've got the right starter motor before you put it back in. And once it's out, we can put the new starter motor in. Just be aware you need to start both bolts before you tighten one of them up. And then with them both started, give them a really good nip, make sure they're nice and tight, and then we can put the remaining parts on, like the wiring harness, followed by the battery carrier and the battery. And that is another job in our compilation. All we need to do now is make sure that it starts. Later, I want to show you how the cam belt is done. But before I do, I want to show you this video. You will need to remove the exhaust and can cause a problem. The studs become a nightmare. So, you've got yourself in a little bit of a situation. You've removed the exhaust downpipe off of your turbo and the bolts will not come out. What do you do? In this video, I will show you how you can remove the bolts to replace them with new studs. This has happened to me many a times on the Ford EcoBoost engine, so that is what we will be showing you in this video. You have probably discovered that the nut is just spinning and spinning and will not come off. The way to get this off is just to get and cut through the nut. Now the manifold can be lowered and we can get on with the job in hand. Replacing these studs is a damn lot cheaper than replacing the turbo, so you've got to give it a go. I would, and I have. So with a grinder, simply cut through the stud nice and flat, as you can see here, and then using a centre pop, mark the stud as central as you can so that we can drill the stud out. Then with a good set of carbide drills, starting with a small drill, start cutting through the stud until you've gone through the centre. This will give you a guideline when you use a bigger drill. And I should have mentioned, before you do this, use something to block any openings. You don't want any drill cuttings going inside the turbo or the engine. Take your time while drilling. Keep stepping up a drill size until you get close to the actual size of the stud. These are 10mm studs, so you don't want to go any bigger than that. And then once you get really near the edge, you may just be able to extract the stud out. This can be quite a time consuming job, so take your time, take it steady so that you don't mess up. A top tip when drilling is not to use a high speed drill. Use something decent like the Milwaukee drill that I used. I'll put a link in the description for you. I find using the drill on speed 2 gives the best effect when drilling. And here we are. So we've managed to get the stud out now. All we need to do is get a tap and re-tap it out, and then we can see if the new studs will fit nicely. So here we are, just nice and steady so that we don't mess the studs up again. If I remember correctly, these are M10 by 1.25. If access is restricted when drilling, you will obviously need to remove the part. Luckily, in the case of this, the 3 studs that was damaged was easily accessible. And here's the moment of truth. The new stud winds in. Not as great as it could be, but will definitely save the cost of a new turbo. And because this didn't feel perfect when winding in, I've decided to use some thread lock. This will help ensure that it stays in. Then just a light nip just to lock it in place. It's just worth mentioning that the reason these studs don't come out is because of the excess heat from the turbo. It hardens the steel, which is why you will find you will need to use the carbide drill bits. I'll try and pop a link in the description and on our Linktree page. Well, I certainly hoped the video has helped you and wish you good luck with the job if this is something that you are doing. And once you've done this, you can rebuild it and put the exhaust pipe back on, and I'm sure you'll be relieved that you've saved yourself quite a bit of money. Time and patience is the only thing you need in this job, so like I've just said, take your time, plenty of patience, and you'll get the job done really well. You may find that this happens to you when you're doing the timing belt on your Ford EcoBoost engine, and we've done a video for that. Welcome back. In this video we will be changing the wet timing belt on the EcoBoost fitted in many Ford vehicles. This timing belt is fitted internally inside, so there's plenty to take off. Ford recommend replacing this belt every 115,000 miles. In some cases this may need doing a little earlier due to the deterioration of the belt blocking the oil strainer. This can be seen here. This can cause the oil light to come on while driving. For this reason, I recommend removing the sump first. So start by removing the exhaust heat shield and then removing the 4 bolts at the top. Then remove the auxiliary belt cowling and the auxiliary belt. Here's the tensioner. The downpipe needs completely removing. There's a clamp here and two on the flange. You can then remove all the sump bolts and remove the sump to see if there is any deterioration on the pickup pipe. If it has deteriorated and the pipe is blocked, just give it a quick clean and make sure there's no debris remaining. You will need to remove the drive shaft bracket and then the plug for the crank locking tool. That fits in here. The crank pulley locks through here in this little hole. This is very important when reassembling. Remove the water pump pulley. It's recommended to replace the water pump. It needs removing anyway. The two alternator bolts will need removing so that the alternator can be slid away. There is a separate belt for the oil pump. That doesn't come with the timing kit. I would recommend changing this at this time. To fit this, I used the laser 6952 timing kit seen here. Now it's time to start stripping the top end down. There's plenty to take off. Start with the coolant header tank. Remove the upper induction pipe. The throttle body can be removed. Remove this hose assembly, it will make things a lot easier. The plastic induction moulding needs removing. Removing the headlight makes a lot more room too. You will need to remove the coil packs and the fuel rail. The wiring harness can be unclipped like so, using a screwdriver and pulling on the wiring. The fuel pump simply unbolts and there's a quick release pipe. Remove the 3 bolts, then lift out the fuel rail. It may be a little tight, but it will pop out. Now the rocker cover bolts can be loosened to remove the rocker cover. This one was fun getting out. Once the cam cover's removed, you can mark the belt and the pulleys up just for reference, like so. Now, placing the flywheel locking tool, then remove the starter motor and lock the flywheel, and finally lock the cams using the cam tools. These will be marked inlet and exhaust and will only fit one way. The engine is now totally locked, it can't move anywhere. This is a good thing because this pulley is really tight. Once you've finally removed it, on the back you can see the timing pickup. Ford recommend changing the crank pulley bolt and also the crankshaft oil seal. These don't come with the timing kit, so you may need to order them. Before the cover can be removed, there's a water hose at the back with a clip. This needs unclipping. Safely support the engine and remove the engine mounting. Now remove the remaining bolts on the front cover. The front cover can now be removed. It might be tight, so the use of a pry bar will help. Now the timing belt's exposed, you can see there's really not much to it at all. Because the engine is locked off, you can simply remove the tensioner and the belt and replace it with the new one. As mentioned earlier, now you should change the oil pump belt too. Refit the new tensioner, followed by the new belt. Now pull the pin to release the tension. Give all the mating faces a good clean, ready for reassembly. In this video, I will show you how to use the CLA locking kit for the Ford EcoBoost engine. You may have seen the other videos that I have done using the laser locking kit. The procedure to stripping it all down is exactly the same, so I'm not going to go into that too much here. If you want to see how it's done, you can check out one of the previous videos how this is done. I will add a link at the end of this video. I did like using the laser equipment. It is obviously cheaper, but I think this one is much better. The main difference being able to adjust and set the VVT timing on the cam pulleys. Start by locking the crank. Just remove the 10mm blanking plug at the bottom back of the engine. Then just time the engine slightly before TDC. Insert the lock tool, then turn the crank the remainder of the way until it locks on the crank web. Then, with the starter motor removed, you can lock the flywheel off as seen here in this picture. This tool alone is fantastic as it gives you the ability to remove the crank pulley, which is exceptionally tight. Now going to the upper side of the engine, we can lock the cams off using the cam tools as seen here. These need to be bolted onto the top of the cylinder head, and then using the adjuster screw, just screw this so that it is flush with the square on the camshaft. If it isn't, then obviously this will need adjusting when we come to rebuilding the timing. When you're happy, just tighten the lock nut. Always secure the tool to the cam first and then secure the remaining fastenings on the block as seen here. Now that the engine is correctly timed, as I'm sure you can agree it's going nowhere, it's time to tackle the crankshaft bolt. Once you've got this removed, you can remove the front cover, and then we can change the timing belt. Now that the engine is correctly locked, you can go ahead and change the timing belt. Now that you've got the belt back on, we need to check the timing after the engine has been turned 2 full revolutions. By doing this, we can establish if the cam pulley needs adjusting. You might discover once you've turned the engine that the tool will not fit on top of the cam. So what we need to do next is we need to refit the front cover, and then I'll take you through how to time the pulleys up. Front cover on. Now we need to refit the crank pulley. Check out this tool that I made to hold the pulley while it is tightened. There is a special tool for tightening the crank pulley, but I do find a decent impact gun and somebody holding the pulley works reasonably well. use the mark that you made earlier when tightening the pulley. Don't do it with the pinning because you will damage the back plate and the tool. So, worst case scenario, you turn the engine 2 full revolutions and one of the cams is out. What do? This is the moment that we use the other tools provided in the kit. So the procedure is we lock the crank off again on the web, and then we lock the flywheel, remove the sensors from the front cover so we can see the bolt, and this is where our cam pulley tool bolts to. Before you fit these, you will notice there is multiple Allen keys on the front. Just make sure these are loose and then the unit will spin independently as seen here. Then you need to line up the bolt holes and fasten the units to the front engine cover. Then push the unit far to the left as you can and then tighten the Allen keys up to lock the unit in place. You will notice that the rod and the pointers line up together. Now the pulleys should be locked up into position and we can get on with adjusting the cam. To do this, loosen the cam pulley and then using a suitable spanner on the cam, turn the cam until the cam lock tool fits correctly, and at that point you can then retighten the pulley. With that done, I would once again recommend turning the engine 2 full revolutions, locking it all off again, and just to be double sure that the timing is now correct. And now that you're happy with that, all that remains to do is rebuild the engine and make yourself a well-deserved drink. This procedure is the same for the turbo and non-turbo version. If you are doing the timing belt on the 1.0 EcoBoost, then there is one thing you need to check, and it is really easy to get to once the engine is stripped down. You may already be aware that the oil pickup strainer gets blocked by the deteriorated timing belt. There's also another filter. This is located behind the oil feed pickup, but as you may think, it doesn't come out here. At the front, with the timing belt off, there is a grub screw down at the bottom right hand side, and if you just remove it, you will find, using a pick tool, you'll be able to pull out the filter and assess it for build-up of debris like you would find on the oil pickup pipe. Steadily just pull it out like so and you will be able to check it. As you can see on this one, it's not blocked or clogged. You could replace it, or you could just clean it out and pop it back in. I will add a link in the description with a part number. Knowing this knowledge when doing the timing belt could save you heaps, and I hope that it has really helped you. So, good luck with the job. And now we've saved the worst until the end. If your Ford EcoBoost 1 litre engine is overheating and is getting bubbles in the header tank caused by combustion gases, the chances are it's the head gasket that has gone. And in this video, I will show you how it can be changed. But before we start, here's a sneak peek of the head gasket. Can you see where it's gone? Let me know in a comment below. Right then, let's get started. This procedure is pretty much the same for the turbo and non-turbo version engine. There is a little bit more to take off on the turbo engine. Let's get the coolant out of the way first. Just at the bottom of the radiator, there is a drain plug. Simply release this and the coolant will drain out. Drain it into a suitable container as to not damage the environment. If you're going to start anywhere, you'll probably want to start at the top. So we'll take out the battery and the airbox. We need this out of the way to enable us to get to the top bolt on the starter motor later on for when we lock the flywheel off, and gain access to the coolant flange. Just loosen the Jubilee clip and then the airbox will just pop out. There's a clamp on top of the battery. This is removed with 3 bolts, and then there is a little bracket at the front that holds the battery in place. With this off and the terminal disconnected, the battery should just lift out, and you should now be able to get to the negative terminal. Unbolt the battery carrier and lift away. The gear cable bracket needs removing. There's a rubber bush at the back. This needs sliding backwards, and then the gear cable will slot out, and then just remove the 3 bolts holding the bracket in place, and then you will be able to get to the top starter motor bolt, which you can just see here. Next up, remove the 4 bolts holding the exhaust heat shield on and unplug the wiring, and the heat shield will lift away. Remove the bottom bracket 13mm nuts on the clamp at the bottom near the gearbox. And then there's 2 bolts where it connects at the flange. Then the 3 fasteners onto the head, and then the exhaust will lower down out of the way. I removed it completely. It's up to you whether you do too. Here's the turbo version. You will have to remove a few more heat shields to get to this. Now let's unclip the remaining wiring and remove the wiring from the top of the engine so that we can remove the coil packs, and then we can remove all the bolts in the rocker cover and remove it. Don't worry too much about the gaskets. If you get a decent headset, these will be supplied complete with the kit. Now you will be able to see the Wetbelt and the cams. These do deteriorate and it will need replacing, so don't skimp on parts. We now need to get the manifold off. So underneath, unbolt the starter motor, just the bottom bolt because you've already done the top one, and then there's a visible bolt that you can see just here, and the remainder of the bolts will be accessible back up top. Here's a little glimpse of where they are. You'll just need to use a small ratchet and a small socket, and you will be able to get these out reasonably easy. And now the manifold should be free so that we can remove it from the cylinder head. And then we are at the stage of timing up the engine. I'm not going to go into this too much. I have got a couple of videos, one with the Sealy timing kit and one with the laser kit. You may be using one of these, so if you want to check out the links at the end of the video, this should shine a little bit of light onto the job, so to make it easier for you to do. Just as a personal recommendation, I've used both of these kits and I prefer the laser one. There's a few more bits in the kit and it just seems to do a little bit of a better job in my opinion. But if you want to get hold of this kit, again, I'll put a link in the description for you to go and check it out. So again, moving forwards, we've got the manifold loose, so we can remove the head away from this when we've got the head bolts out. And then we need to remove the coolant flange, just 4 bolts, and then this comes off nice and easily. Then there's a couple of bolts holding the coolant pipe to the back of the water pump. You'll need to remove this so that the front cover will lift away. The crank sensor wiring can be a little bit of fun, but if you just press this little nodule on the plug here, it will release the mechanism and then the wiring will just unclip. So at this point, just have a good check around, make sure that everything's off on the top, obviously apart from the front cover, which we're going to cover next. So now we're going to lock off the flywheel so we can remove the crankshaft pulley bolt, the tightest bolt you've ever undone. Just be sure to have locked the cams off and the crank on the crankshaft web before you put this in place. I always like to make some sort of reference, so I just put a little Tipex mark on the flywheel so that we know when we're building it back up that that's where it came down. And then pop in the crankshaft timing pin. We then need to remove the front cover. There's more on this in the other video that I will be linking to at the end. Just pay attention to the gasket seal that is here. I would definitely replace it, this could cause you problems in the future. Mark up the cams because you're going to remove these and you wouldn't want to get them mixed up when you rebuild it. Remove the end cap, and now everything should be disconnected and off of the cylinder head. So all that remains to do now is remove the cams, and then we can take the head bolts out and remove the head. So lift away the caps and then lift off the cam like so. Might be a little bit tight. Mark it up to make sure you know which is the top for when you retime it up later on. I always like to lay things out as they've come off so you know exactly where they go in the same order, somewhere nice and clean, and remove the valve buckets. Now all we need to do is remove the cylinder head bolts. These are not Torx bolts, they're a special tool. As you can see here, you can get the part number. Check out our Linktree page. Here you will be able to find the additional tools and some of the parts we used for this job. And once the bolts are out, we can lift the cylinder head off and we can see what we can find. And upon the first inspection, we can see that cylinder 1 piston crown is all clean. So this is where the coolant's been getting. And this engine had a misfire, and we can see this where the head gasket has gone between cylinder 1 and 2. Maybe yours has similar issues too. So now the engine is all stripped down, you will need to have the cylinder head skimmed and pressure tested to ensure there's no additional faults. And then we need to give the cylinder block a really good clean down and also clean out the bolt holes. This is very important. If we don't do this, then the bolt cannot fasten down properly and could cause another cylinder head problem later on. Now, once you've got the head set, we need to change all the gaskets and seals. Most of these seals come with the headset, but if they don't, I would definitely advise you replacing them. Here's the new head gasket. Pop it onto the dowels. If the dowels are a little bit low, it's worth just lifting them up slightly so that the head gasket is in the correct place. These gaskets just lift out and then we can just put the new ones in. You'll notice that they mount a little bit higher. Obviously, as time goes on, they become flat. So all the new gaskets will seal much better. And here's the cylinder head, all skimmed with no issues on the pressure test, all ready for us to put back onto the engine block. Carefully lift the cylinder head back onto the engine block and just ensure that it locates onto the dowels that we saw earlier, and then put in the replacement cylinder head bolts. Don't forget to follow in the tightening sequence and the torque settings for the cylinder head bolts. And here is a quick breakdown of the torque stages and settings. Once that job's done, you can refit the buckets and then the cams. Just make sure you put the right cam in the right place, and also be very wary that it is in the top dead centre position. If not, this could cause damage to the valves when tightening up the caps for the cams. And as before, observing the numbers and the order from removal. I would highly recommend running these bolts down by finger and then with a 1/4 inch ratchet, and then obviously tighten them to the correct torque setting. And when that's done, you can replace the timing lock tools on top of the cams. Make sure that you've got plenty of time and patience for this process, because it can be fiddly and you wouldn't want to do any damage and have to repeat the whole process at additional cost to yourself. And here is a tip that I discovered when rebuilding the engine. If you remove the throttle body, it allows a little access to the manifold bolts when tightening the manifold back up. So now we can refit the tensioner and the cam belt, release the pin, and the timing should be spot on. And as always, I would recommend turning the engine 2 full revolution with the front covers back on and the timing is correct. All that remains to do is make sure all the surfaces are clean, put some fresh sealant on and bolt the front cover back on. If you noticed when you removed the front cover, there are 2 bolts, this one here and one on the lower right hand side, that has a guide on it to locate the front cover centrally. If you put these 2 in first and then put the remaining bolts in afterwards. Don't tighten them up just yet though. Put the crank pulley on and loosely tighten the bolt, and then you can tighten the remaining bolts on the front cover. Now that the front cover is nice and tight, we can put the pin into the crankshaft pulley and tighten the bottom pulley bolt. Remember, this is a free floating crank pulley. You can now reinsert the cam pulley tools just to ensure that the timing is correct as it was before we stripped down the engine. Now is a good time to put the engine mount back on. And as always, when doing a timing belt, I would recommend removing all the timing tools, turning the engine 2 full revolutions, and then making sure that the timing lock pins fit back in the same place. This ensures that there can be no faults made with the timing. And it's also worth noting, when you're turning the crankshaft, if the engine stops turning, you know that there's something seriously wrong and you'll need to obviously repeat what you've done. Just to recap, turn the engine just before TDC, insert the crank lock tool that you can see here, then turn the crankshaft the remainder of the way until it locks. And as you can see, I made a Tipex mark on the crankshaft pulley to give us an extra reference. Then insert the pin on the crank pulley. This ensures that the crank timing's right, and then followed by the camshaft lock tools, and these should just slot on nicely. And that's it. The job should be fantastic, and we can refit the starter motor and rebuild the remaining items on the engine. Don't fully tighten the bottom starter bolt until you've got the top one in. And once that's done, we can refit the gear cables, mounting bracket, followed by the battery carrier and the battery and anything else that we've removed earlier on in the process. By now you should have rebuilt almost everything. And get the auxiliary belt on and then refill the oil with a new oil filter and the correct grade oil. This is a different oil with it having a wet timing belt. And refill and top up the coolant. Have a really good look round, make sure that everything's connected back up and you've got no spare bolts anywhere. And for topping up the coolant, I really love this purge tool from Laser. It removes all the air from the system and then it refills it, so there's no possible chance of any airlocks. And we can see visually that there's no leaks on the system. If there was, the gauge would drop to 0, and then once refilling the system, it will put in the correct amount of coolant. And now the engine should run perfectly. and we should now have no issues with the coolant, with any bubbles or combustion gases in there. And that's it, folks. Your total guide to changing the head gasket on the 1 litre EcoBoost non-turbo and turbo engine. I really hope that this video has helped you and has answered quite a few questions. If you do have any further questions, just leave us a comment below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. And as promised throughout the video, here's the link to our Linktree page with plenty of information and listings for the things that we've used in these videos. Please take a look and support the channel. So thanks for watching. This has been how to fix it. Why not check out these other interesting EcoBoost videos, and we'll see you over there right now.